Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. We want to welcome you back to the podcast. If this is your first time, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully you'll gain some enjoyment out of this show. Again, this is the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, where me and Dave try to resolve all the world's problems. We're coming up short because there's still a lot of work to do. But if you're
I'm
watching,
barely saving a house plant right now.
but if you were seeing our screen, you actually see we have a third guest. And so our distinguished guest speaker today is Caren Cooper. So I'm going to give her, I'm sorry, I didn't give Dave a chance to say, hey, I'm sorry.
Hey.
All right. And back to the introduction of our special guest today. And our special guest is Caren Cooper. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience, I think they would appreciate that.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, guys. Like Joe said, I am Caren Cooper, and I am a trauma-informed mindset coach. So I help entrepreneurs break free from self-doubt and imposter syndrome that cripples us, that keeps us running on that hamster wheel of mediocrity. And I do this with my trauma-informed program called Unscrew Yourself, where we take you on a journey to eradicate the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome, but also reconnect to your unique badass self, right? It's also reconnecting to who you are at the core so that you can actually have the success that you deserve. So that is what I do.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I
Unscrew
might have to
yourself.
have
I love that.
yeah, I might have to have a side conversation with you. You might be able to help me unscrew myself. So.
Yes, join me on this journey.
Absolutely. All right. So welcome, Caren. And again, it's
Thank
a
you.
pleasure to have you on our podcast. So with that, I think I'm gonna hand it
What's
off to
today's topic? What's today's topic?
I'm again, we're all kind of in a disarray right now. But so today's topic, and we kind of talked about this offline, but we thought it was most appropriate. So we are going to talk about square peg in a round hole. All right. Does anybody ever feel like that? Whether it's corporate America, whether it's just being around the family, whether it's just being who you are. How many of us out there can relate to that? So that's where we're going to start. And actually, instead of passing off to Dave, we hear enough from Dave, so we'll hand it off to Caren Cooper first, just to kind of explain her, identification of what that means to her. How does that resonate with her?
We were talking offline, and I was saying how much I deeply resonated with it, and I was joking, like I say, like my book is going to be called "Who Said," because I've always been the one to sort of buck the trend and like question things, and things like that. And I even said, like, offline, like, my name is Caren, so it's not like, when people hear my name, they instantly spell it with a K. And I've always, like, it always, to be honest, drove me nuts. Like, I always had, like, it was almost like excuse me, it's like it bothered, like, my unique name, the unique spelling of my name, I should say, used to drive me insane. Like, being unique, being different, used to actually bother me so much, so that I always wanted to be someone else. If I'm being, totally transparent, like, I never wanted to really be me, even though I love authenticity and I love being true to who you are. But it's really hard when you are different and you're a square peg trying to fit into a round hole, because nobody else is like you, number one, and number two, it wasn't celebrated. It was frowned upon to be different. It was like you were made fun of for being different, and all of those kind of things. And so, but I always knew that's who I was. Like in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, when the island of misfit toys was like on an island separate from people, it drove me nuts. I'm like, I don't understand why they have to be on like an island separate from people. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand why it can't be celebrated. And so for a long time, I didn't celebrate it. And now that's why my course is what it is, and why I do what I do now, because I'm like, you know what? No, this truly, truly needs to be celebrated. And I was saying offline, but I'll say this. I'm reading Jamie Kern Lima's book, Worthy. She's the founder of Ed Cosmetics. And I was saying to Dave and Joe offline that she talks about being different and breaking generational patterns. And she's like, you're not crazy, you're just first. And I just think that's so important to put in here, because stepping into your uniqueness. And the fact is, even she says it, but here's the truth, nobody is like us. There's nobody like Joe, there's nobody
Right.
like Dave, and there's nobody else like me. We are
Yeah.
each our own unique human beings. So even if we're trying to fit into a square peg in a round hole, and we can get into the whole like society thing, which we can start there if you want to, we don't have to. But there's just things coming from all ends. I'll just say it like that. There's things coming from all ends. And I honestly think it's time to celebrate our uniqueness, our differences, and step into our powers that be to be that way.
Yeah, that's interesting, Karen. I like the perspective of celebrating uniqueness. And that's we might use that later. But yeah, I
Nothing
mean,
of mine is
I
trademark. You can use it all.
I think a lot of people can resonate with that, because I think this is like the fourth time we said resonate in the last couple
Yeah.
of minutes. But I think a lot of people can identify with that, because the society and even work cultures have
Mhm.
certain expectations and social norms.
Right.
And what if you're not exactly in tune with that, or it just doesn't, you just don't identify with it? How are you supposed to find your way,
Mhm.
because you're not in the air quotes social norm? And we were talking about this offline too. Do we go to college? Do we go in the military? Do we go into corporate America? I mean, do we do something on our own? I mean, what is the expectation, and how do we fit into that? And Joe and I have talked a lot about this throughout our episodes. We have a very colorful past, with our careers, and we talk about taking the long scenic route, and there's pros and cons to that. But you really do learn a lot about yourself taking the long scenic route, because sometimes, and very often so, it's painful. We make a lot of road trip references. You're going to get a lot of flat tires. You're going to have to do some engine work. You have to tune up and stuff like that. So it kind of makes you take pause and think and reflect about how you fit into whatever is expected. And if you
Mhm.
don't, do you force yourself? Do you shrink yourself? Do you shave yourself
Yes.
down from that
Yes.
square
Yes.
to fit in that round hole? Or do you, try to find a bigger round hole that you can kind of fit in, but you're
Right.
still not filling in all the areas? So, how do we navigate through our careers and through our personal lives, um, knowing that, we're all unique in our own ways, and how do we fit in, and what do we do to, help facilitate those, uh, the fitting in, or adapting to the situation or the environments.
Well, this all I think all of us experience this, and I think it really comes to life for me. My son came over to visit the other day, and we are just talking about him and now his son, the quirks that they have and the things that they do, and that it just really hits me that we all have this uniqueness when we're born, right? We
Mhm.
all are different, and we do we spend a lot of time and energy on changing that uniqueness from, and it
Right.
starts at our kids. We start to make them do things that may not be natural for them, but we make them fit that, and that's where this all starts, with us trying to get them in alignment with everybody else, and so
Right.
we really take away their uniqueness, the things that makes them who they are. So it starts when we're young, and we continue, down that path of I have to fit in. If I'm not like everybody else, then I don't matter. I don't count. And I think that's what we struggle with, because you're right. We all are unique. And Dave said it, offline when we were talking a little bit. I did refer to myself a lot as average Joe, because I was just like everybody else, or I felt like I was just like
Right.
everybody else. So, or that was my goal, not to be anything different, because then again, now I've got to explain myself. I don't fit this, so I've got to, so it's just a little bit easier to trim those edges off to try and fit in that round hole. But all of us have discovered that's not a comfortable place. You're basically hiding who you are and your potential, who you could be, because you're trying to align with things that may not align with what you want to accomplish or do. So
Right. And to all that point that what both of you were saying about the shrinking and the fitting in, and the kids, and making them be, I did it myself too, and making them be a certain way. And you said, Joe, about mattering. And the thing is that what happens, because that's what I'm finding in with what I do now, is that there's I don't matter. So what happens is when we are trying to, when we shrink down and we try to fit in and we take away our uniqueness, and even like if we do it to our children and whatever else, or if it's done to us, we have this belief now, we form this belief based off of that, I don't matter, I'm not enough. And we take that belief into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it limits us in certain ways, shapes, or form. And it's different for everyone, but that's what I'm finding with what I do. And that's what I found even with me personally, because I was shrinking, I was hiding, I was doing all the things. I always felt this push, and it was almost like this tug of war, because inside I knew who I was, but on the outside I was presenting as something completely different. And so that's what I'm finding with my clients and things like that, is like, you know what, wait, no, let's get to the core of what's really going on. And a lot of it is, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I don't matter. And when you can eradicate those, and then you can become a whole new version of yourself, and then you feel like, oh wait, this is who I truly am.
Right.
And that could be celebrated and things like that, and fitting in. And it's why, and no offense to both of you, but like there's no fitting in, like it's we are who we are.
Right.
And that just in my personal opinion, needs to be celebrated. Like I keep saying celebrated, but it's, we are who we are and accepted. And, you don't have to like everything I say, you don't have to like everything I do, you don't have to agree with everything I do. We can agree to disagree and move on.
Right. No, I really appreciate what you're saying about celebrating, because you're right. We choose it as a way to, okay, I got to align with everybody. I can't stand out, but I like the idea that we should be celebrating uniqueness. We should be promoting that. We should be encouraging that in people, because I think we touched on it earlier, that that's how innovation happens. That's how things change, because people see it a different way. They interpret it a different way, and they're not scared to say, hey, that shouldn't be
Right.
that way, or we should consider this, because me and David talked about the shrinking and not feeling worthy and all that. And even me, when I was earning my doctorate degree, and I had this idea that once I become a doctor, people are going to respect me. And my wife looked at me and she was like, who's going to do that? Why are they going to do that? And I was kind of offended. I
I
was
ask
like,
myself that a lot.
I'm going to be a doctor. People are going to have to respect me. And she was right. Just because I have this title, just because I've done these things, doesn't change that. It all starts with me. And me and Dave talk about this all the time. Sometimes you have to come in and kick the door down and say, this is who I am. I'm a doctor, I'm an author, I'm all these things. And if you don't like it, oh well. And
Exactly.
I think you're right. That's what we should be celebrating. Again, the accomplishments, the people we are, that we are proud of, and not, again, hiding yourself because of. And that's why I say, when I was referring to myself as average Joe, I did that for a lot of years, just because I didn't want to make anybody else feel bad or less than, because I'm coming in saying I'm doctor this. A lot of times I wouldn't tell people, for many conversations that we had, that I was a doctor or that I had done all these things, just because I didn't want the conversation to start to sway or start to change, and again, make some people feel insignificant or less than. And so I shouldered that, or I carried that on my shoulders, to say, well, I'm going to help them, rather than coming
Right.
out saying, this is who I am, like me or not. And so
I like
I
what you
still struggle
I'm
with
going to
that.
jump in, Joe. I
Yeah.
like what you said about which version of you are we going to present. And I think
Mm.
that's an interesting statement, because as you were saying that, I was kind of drifting off in my own reflection, saying, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because what version are you presenting?
Right.
Is it, that you're a mathematician or a scientist, or that you're an engineer, or that you're an actor or musician or athlete, or the average Joe, if you will, and again with the air quotes. So which version are you presenting to be accepted? Because we are all unique in our ways. I mean, I don't know very much about sports, but I pretend to. That's the version I talk to Joe with a lot. I like the idea of that little white ball going in that hoop clear across the other field, and they have to run after it all the time. And I just don't get why they're tackling each other for a little white ball. So, that's my version that I present to Joe with my lack of athletic knowledge, if you will. So it made me stop and think, when we are talking and communicating with other people, what version are we presenting? And why are we presenting that version? Is it to fit in? Is it to be accepted? Or is it because we want to be accepted, or we are trying to fit in? Because that's where we do want to be. I need to talk to Joe more about athletics so I can figure out the right words to use for the right games. So it made me ponder for a moment, when we do talk with other people, who are we really presenting? Is it our own authentic self, or is it someone else or something else that we're trying to portray so we can fit in a little bit better? So I'm going to pause for a moment, because I think
you bring up a really great point, and I think I've done that. I've done that too. I've done the exact same thing, but innately we want to be loved and accepted. As human beings, we innately want to be loved and accepted. So in my opinion, to answer your question, that's why we present different versions of ourselves. So this way we get the external validation.
Yeah, we're social animals.
Right. We get the external validation, but I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. We gotta love ourselves. We gotta love ourselves. It's about loving ourselves. I know, it's crazy. And I'm on this big journey myself right now, like huge journey myself right now of really truly loving who I am. Really, like I literally do mirror work. I speak to myself in the mirror every morning, and like instead of beating the crap out of instead of beating myself over things, I'm switching it to, I'm proud of you for doing this and that kind of a thing. Because that's where it starts. But because, like I said, we're looking for the external, so we present different versions of ourselves because we want the validation. We want, oh my God, a great job. Oh my God, this. And I'm not saying we shouldn't receive it. By the way, that's not what I'm saying. But like if we're presenting as different versions of ourselves, that, in my opinion, and the stuff that I've done in the last few years, is we want to be loved, we want to be accepted, and all of that kind of a things. And we don't realize it really begins with us. We are our own approval. We are enough and whole as we are. We do matter. What we say matters. People want to hear what we have to say. Those are actually affirmations I say to myself every morning to also.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that you said, and a great point, to accept yourself.
Yeah.
Because we were talking briefly offline, and I was sharing my career with you. I was in the military and military police career for many years. And when I couldn't do that anymore, I had kind of an identity crisis. What do I do? I was going to school to be, for business, because I wanted to be a manager in the military and well, actually I was a manager in the military, but to go higher up, and I was trying to have that edge. And then when that got cut short, it was like, what do I do now? Where do I go? I mean, I have all this experience, but I can't do what I've been doing for almost 20 years. So, when we talk about starting, when we talk about identity and square peg round hole, for people that have been displaced for one reason or another in their professional careers, where do you go with that? How do you create that new identity? Where do you find that? How do you, you accept yourself, or not, or accept the situation or not? But what do you do with that information? How do you move forward knowing that you have to change somehow so that you can keep going forward?
You call me and join me, and I can coach you too. But I'm laughing, but it's partly true. That's exactly what I do. I literally, with my program, I say unique, connect, but you're literally eradicating your old programming and becoming a new version of yourself. So number one, you call me, and we chat and that kind of a thing. But also, to your point, listen, and Dave, we talked about this offline too. Like I had the same thing happen to me. I was in corporate career. I worked in the advertising industry for many years, and I was laid off in 2018, right before I was turning 50. So, and I had a huge identity crisis about it, because I was the working mom, and I thrived on being the working mom and being overwhelmed, and, and the hustle. I thrived on all of that. And and it wasn't even at that point I was doing personal development and things like that. But even doing that, I was still like, who am I? What am I doing? And that kind of a thing. And what I will say to people, and I was like, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grow up, and that kind of a thing. And I was like, do I do, because I was doing health and wellness coaching on the side. I'm like, do I do health and wellness coaching? What do I do? And that kind of a thing. And it was just like, is that frowned upon because I should be working in corporate America, because that's, you know, the line I was being fed, and all the things and what I did then. So, you know, if you're like, I don't know, Caren, I don't want to call her and join her program. I deconstructed. I talked to people. Like you know, there's no shame in being like, I'm feeling this way. I have no idea what to do with these things. You know, even if you don't do personal development, that kind of a thing. It's like, feel the feelings, and don't, there's no shame in all of that. And so what I did was I spoke to people and I was like, what's going on? And I really sat with myself, and that's uncomfortable as hell. And it's miserable. I'm not gonna lie about it, but it's also what happens on the other end of that misery is amazing. So sometimes you have to sit in it, literally sit in the crap, so to speak. And really figure out who you are and what do you want to be, because deep down inside we know who we are, we just hide it for so long.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, what do I really want? And write it down, like do a brain dump. The biggest thing I think, a lot of one of the biggest lessons I've learned is doing a brain dump, because you have so much information in your head, even if you don't love journaling, because I don't personally. I love journaling. I'm more of a verbal processor, but all the stuff that's going on in your head, just write it down and don't think about it. And then when you go back and look at it, you'll see things that pop up and you're like, ooh, that elicits some sort of emotion or some sort of feeling in you. Then you can go from there.
Yeah, that reminds me of people, and Joe and I have talked about this before in other episodes, where, you know, people are doing a job and then they realize, or they're going to school for something and then they realize they
Yeah.
hate it or they don't like it, and they change, you know. Some, you know, we've been programmed to, you know, if you come from, I don't know, I'm just gonna pull something out of the air. You come from a family of attorneys, it's almost ingrained to you that you're going to be
Yeah.
an attorney, you know. But what if I want to be an athlete or a musician? And then, you know, people start looking at you kind of weird, like, why would you do that? It's like, well, that's what I love to do. Joe, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there with the, identity crisis. And I mentioned this to you too, before we got online, is the idea that, I spent so much time in the military, and after I retired, I had that same identity crisis of, who am I now? What am I supposed to be doing? Because the military controlled a lot of my life for almost 36 years. So to now have to do some of these things or to think on my own was a challenge for me. But I do like what you said about Caren, about saying, about we all thrive sometimes on that chaos, that all those things going on, and everything in our
It
head.
makes you feel important and like you have something to
Right.
do.
And then when that's gone, you're like, oh crap, what do I do now? But I do like the idea that you talked about, getting all that stuff out of your head. Because me and Dave have talked about this too. Every night I go to bed with a million things in my head, and it's hard for me to sleep sometimes because I've just got so much stuff up there. So I think that's a good idea, to dump that stuff out sometime, just so that you can have a clear head and to think about what's next. And the other thing you touched on too, talking to someone, and that's one of the challenges I have, because again, society over the years have told you, hey, don't, you're seen lesser than if you talk to somebody, if you get help or
If you can't keep
assistance.
yourself together, then
Right.
you're not right or
and
not
and that
normal.
was really big in the military, that that
Mhm.
they want you to be strong, they want you to put on this facade that you can handle all these things, but the reality is, years and years of that, it just
It
becomes
takes
that.
a toll.
Yeah, it does. And that all those things end up in your closet.
Mhm.
And if anybody ever unlocks that stuff, oh my goodness, because you just
Yep.
hid all that stuff away. So I really appreciate some of these things that you're saying, because most of us fit into these categories. So
Yeah,
I,
I'm
I
gonna
do appreciate it.
bounce back to the celebration piece, because I don't want us to overlook that and just gloss over it. I think that is so important to celebrate ourselves as who we are. You know, like Joe said, you know, I too thought I'm going to get my doctorate, this is going to be cool. People are going to respect me. I'm going to, climb the corporate ladder. And it's like, it's not, you know, honestly, not a lot of that happened.
Yeah.
It's just, because you start finding out who you really are and where you don't fit in. And that in and of itself is a celebration to acknowledge yourself
Uh-huh.
as yourself. And I think that's a cool thing because within that, there is that journey, and you have to celebrate all those milestones and inch stones and those little things that you can celebrate, whether it's another birthday, whether it's a new year, whether it's completing an assignment or a
Mhm.
project or whatever. I mean, those are all things that we need to celebrate
Yeah.
because it's adding to who we are, because otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. When you make a conscious choice to do something, it's because you want to do it. Something is driving you to do that. You're not being forced to do it. So I think celebrating is an important piece that we need to really.
Yeah, 100%. And Dave, I was like you. I enjoyed my corporate career, and I was like, I'm gonna be, yeah, I'm gonna be the women's CEO, because I started in 91, and so it was in the advertising world, and so I was like, no, I'm gonna move up the ladder. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that, and whatnot. And then I had my daughter, and I was like, that for me was the switch. It was like, I don't necessarily want it anymore. You know what I mean? And it was like, what do you mean I don't want that anymore? It was like, it was a lot of, push and pull, back and forth kind of a thing. Um, and yeah, I mean, and I was the working mom, and so there was a lot of all that. But I will say about the celebrations, um, one of the things that I do, I want to, if I may, um, every night is a yay me. This is one of the things I do every night. Yay me's and gratitudes. And I think it's really important that we do that, and just celebrate what we've done, because a lot of times we also gloss over.
Yeah.
We do it,
Yeah.
we do something, and then we move to the next thing. We do
Yeah.
something, we move to the next thing, and that kind of a thing. And we don't take a moment to enjoy it and revel in it and celebrate it also, because it's
Yeah.
frowned upon, that kind of a thing. So just to quickly, just write yay me's. Three of them. I write three. You can write more, but whatever it is, write, yay me for, kicking butt on the podcast today. Yay me for doing that project that I was putting off.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Whatever it is, and every night, just that, that's something that you do, and then you also start looking for the good. You know what I'm saying? Even in the day, what good is going to happen to me today? And there you go, and then you start looking for the good, and then you can, and it's just, and you're feeling differently, and you're showing up differently because you're doing those types of things.
Caren, I do something similar when I assist people, and that is to celebrate the even those smallest things,
Yeah.
because and we talk about this too on our podcast, just as far as moving forward. A lot of times we think of accomplishments as reaching that milestone or finishing that project, but it's not that. It's all those little things that help you progress from one day to the next or from 1 hour to the next. But just helping people realize you are winning, you are succeeding. You may not be arriving at your destination in the time that you'd like, but if you really take a look at the things that you've accomplished, all the positive things that you've done, then you'll realize you are winning. And that's
Mhm.
kind of the approach that I've tried to take. Even with my education journey, that's where I was struggling, because I saw the end state. I kept seeing, okay, it's going to take me this year to graduate. And I struggled with that. And it wasn't until I started looking at, okay, I turned in this assignment, I did this, and
Mhm.
I started to see all those wins, all those accomplishments, and it just kept propelling me and moving me forward. So I appreciate that, just identifying that that's everybody. You're winning, just picking to choose and
Yep.
choosing what you identify as a win, as a
Yeah.
positive thing, as something that's good.
And I think we need to stop comparing ourselves to other people
Mm.
on
Yeah.
what we determine
Yeah.
success is, because success to some people is just getting up out of bed in the morning,
Yep.
versus others, maybe it's that next big account or something like that. So, well, we've got just about 2 minutes left. So, Joe, um, just to give us a little time check.
Yeah. So again, this has been a great conversation, and time has definitely flown by. I didn't
Yeah.
realize we were that close. But so Caren, we would want to just give you an opportunity. Is there anything you want to finish up with or pass on to our audience out there that may assist them as they're going through their journey?
Um, that's a really good question. You know what? Here's what I want to say to you. Okay. I want to say this, that you matter. You are enough as you are. That's what I want to say. And I'm here for you, and then I'm rooting for you. That's actually what I want to say to people, because I don't think we hear that enough from other people. And there are people that are on your side, even if you don't feel like there are people that are on your side.
I love
Well,
that. That's
yeah, I do
awesome.
too. Thanks for that. Yeah, definitely. Well, Dave, do you have anything else?
After that, I don't have anything, because I
All
mean,
right,
that's
I
a great
know.
way to kind of summarize everything. So yeah, that's great.
Absolutely. Wow. Again, this has been a fun episode. And like I said, the time just flew by. And so
Mhm.
we want to thank our special guest, Caren Cooper, for joining us today on the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. And Caren, so if people want to connect with you or get in touch with you or work with you, where can they reach you?
First, I want to say both thank you to both you and Dave for having me. This was really a lot of fun. I didn't realize the time either. And connect with me. I'm on all I'm on all the things. I get around, I like to say. But on both LinkedIn, on Facebook, my name is Caren, Caren, Chagrin, Schagren Cooper. And on Instagram, it's Caren Cooper _. So all three of those platforms, you can connect with me, and all three of those platforms have my Calendly link.
Okay.
Free imposter syndrome audits, free, I do free consultate, whatever you want. I call it imposter syndrome audits, consultations, conversations, whatever you want to call it. All three of those places have my link to
Okay.
book a call with me. That's totally just 30 minutes of us. I call it, shouldn't, I'm not going to curse, but we just have conversations about what it is that I do and that kind of a thing, and see if it's something you wanna.
Okay, and I'll add those links, all of your links to the description, so people, if they listen to this or watch this, they'll have
Mhm.
access to that. So
Cool.
again, thanks for joining us today. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up and get us out of here. So again, thank you all for tuning in, and hope you gained something from this episode. As always, if there's something you want to hear about or you want us to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us. Our information is in the description below. Again, or if you want to reach out to Caren, her information will be there as well. So, with that, we want to thank you all for tuning in today. And in the future, continue being your not so ordinary you.